Recently, this past week, in the beginning of August 2022, I went on a multi-park road trip in the Midwest. This itinerary included Cedar Point for 2 days, Kings Island, and Kentucky Kingdom, both of those parks for 1 day. In this video, I'm going to talk about what went on during the trip, the challenges I faced, and any recommendations I have for any of you going forward of what you can do while facing certain challenges in those same roller coaster trips. The main challenge for us was the weather. The weather forecast showed thunderstorms on both the days we were planning on going to Kings Island and Kentucky Kingdom. Something I also want to mention before starting out is that I did film some footage of the park at Cedar Point during my vlog, but I didn't record any footage of the actual rides from any park during the trip. There are 3 reasons for that. 1. This was a trip, and that means we had very limited time for each park. I was at Cedar Point for 2 days, but it was so crowded both days that I just wanted to get as many rides in as possible so I can properly rank them on my YouTube videos. On my second day at Cedar Point, my friend also came, so I wanted to spend time with him, going on the coasters, as opposed to just standing there and recording the rides from many different angles. In the case of Kings Island and Kentucky Kingdom, there was inclement weather in the area when I went to those parks, so it was very important that when I saw a ride running, that I get as many rides in as possible before it shuts down again for weather. I've started to lay off a little and spending time recording off-ride footage at parks, because when I go to parks, I like to spend time riding the coasters, not recording them. Although I will continue to try my best to manage my time at amusement parks in order to be able to record copyright-free off-ride footage, I cannot guarantee that I will continue to do that. Instead, I will be using copyright-free off-ride footage from other creators. Let me start out by talking about what happened on the way to and when I first got to Cedar Point. On Monday afternoon, we landed in Cleveland Hopkins International Airport. There were supposed to be scattered thunderstorms in the area that afternoon, but instead, it was just simply cloudy. Since the Hotel Breakers was full that night, we checked into a hotel near the airport, and our plan was to drive to Cedar Point the next day and check into the Hotel Breakers, and then go to the park. When we arrived at Breakers the next morning, we stood in line in the gift shop to get the Fastlane Plus. Right as we were about to redeem our Fastlane Plus, the person at the front desk told us that she had just received the call that Valraven was going to be down all day, and that Maverick was going to be down for most of the day and may open for about 30 minutes to an hour, and then close again for a few more hours. When she said that about Maverick, I didn't understand why they were so certain Maverick would be down most of the day, and would only open for these little time periods and then shut back down again. This led me to believe that they were planning on opening it up for 30 minutes, and then shutting it down for multiple hours because they had some kind of routine maintenance planned, but I later found out that that was not the case. They just predicted that because Maverick was having a lot of issues that day. I was obviously very disappointed, because from what I remembered, Maverick was my #1 coaster last time I went to Cedar Point. Afterwards, as I entered through the Magnum entrance, I saw Magnum stuck on the lift hill and that riders were evacuated. At this point, I really started to worry about why so many rides were down at once. In my most recent vlog, you could see me go on a rant and express my frustration about how the majority of the rides of the park were down. I admit that I was wrong about the fact that they were deciding to do routine maintenance on Maverick and Valraven. The reality of the situation was that they predicted that Maverick would continue to open and then shut down throughout the day because of the nature of its technical issues the day I was there. And they knew Valraven would be down all day because the problems it was having were not fixable in 1 day. After I saw Magnum and Maverick were down, I went over to Steel Vengeance and that was also down. It was testing, but then the team member said it would not open for a while. At this point, I was fuming. Why were all these rides down at once? The first theory I came up with is that somebody hacked the ride systems at Cedar Point, but that option is very unlikely. We then started walking back towards the Magnum area, and then I saw Magnum going up the lift hill with riders. I then sprinted towards Magnum and I managed to get on in 10 minutes with Fastlane. As can be seen in my vlog, I was exceptionally impressed with Magnum's ride experience. When I saw Steel Vengeance running again, I went back there. It had one other short breakdown while I was in line, but I still managed to get a ride on it. I will make a separate video describing my new takes on the coasters of Cedar Point, which will include Steel Vengeance. I then went to do Millennium Force and some other rides. I then went to sit down near Maverick while it was down, and wait for it to open back up. It did not seem like it'll open that day, but I still had a little bit of hope in me. Eventually, I gave up, and went to the Fastlane queue of Steel Vengeance again. While I was in the middle of the queue, someone messaged me and said that Maverick was testing, and then I sprinted there as fast as I could. When it finally opened back up, I got second train after it opened. Although it did not disappoint me, it still no longer stayed as my #1, mostly because I've ridden so many other Elite Legendary coasters since my last rides on Maverick in 2018. But those ones are a lot better than Maverick, but that does not say Maverick is a bad ride. Overall, that day was a very big disappointment because of all the rides going down, and Maverick being down for most of the day, but I can say it was still a success. The weather was also perfect for that day, not too hot, and there was no precipitation or lightning at all that day. On Wednesday, the next day, my friend came over to Cedar Point. I would say my second day was even worse for ride closures than the previous one. Steel Vengeance was down in the morning all the way until 3 p.m. During the time it was down, there was a crane working on the ride structure behind the lower area of the first inversion. Apparently that's the part of the structure that has had the most issues. It wasn't a good sign that the crane was out, and because of that I thought it would be down all day, but to my surprise, it opened later in the day. I got 2 rides on it, and my takes changed and I started to like Steel Vengeance over Maverick. Surprisingly, Maverick was up all day on Wednesday, with only a small 10-minute delay in the morning. Maverick really seems like a hit or miss in terms of reliability. On that same day, Magnum was down for a large chunk of the day, Rougarou was down for an hour, and Millennium Force broke down on me 3 separate times, but it did go back up fairly quickly on all those occasions. That evening, there was a major thunderstorm at around 7 p.m., and then there was a short break at around 9 p.m. During the break, there were a flock of people waiting in front of Steel Vengeance while it was still closed because of lightning in the area. It then started to rain down, and it was 30 minutes before the park closing, so I didn't think there was any chance that I would get to do another ride on Steel Vengeance. The next day, we woke up in the morning and drove to Kings Island. The forecast showed thunderstorms in Mason, Ohio all day. As we were driving there, we ran into multiple spots of pouring rain. That night before, we were thinking of switching the trip itinerary to Pennsylvania, which included going to Kennywood and Knoebels, because the weather there looked better. We decided not to follow through, and that it would be better to stick to the plan. When we got to Kings Island, every single ride was closed because there was lightning in the area. It was not raining or thundering in the park, but there was lightning in the area. Most parks, including Kings Island, have a 10-mile, 30-minute rule. This means that if there was a lightning strike detected within 10 miles away, all rides need to be shut down. In order to open back up, there needs to be 30 minutes of no lightning within 10 miles away. When we approached Orion, it was down for lightning, but 10 minutes later it opened up and I got a ride on it. I will discuss my takes on it in a separate video. There were a few other periods of lightning in the area and some rain showers, and during those periods all the rides went down, except for Flight of Fear. Because of the weather, the park was empty, and every single ride was either a walk-on or a station wait, with the exception of Flight of Fear, being a 10 to 15 minute wait while everything else was down for weather, but that's understandable. Later before park closing, the thunder and lightning left the area, and everything opened back up. I marathoned Mystic Timbers because it was a walk-on, and then when Orion opened up, I got 2 more rides before park closing. Since Kings Island was a success in terms of it working out with the weather, because it was a good weather policy, and because it was empty and I got to do so many rides I wanted to do over and over again, the Kings Island weather challenge was over. But the biggest challenge yet was posed for us for the next day. We knew all along that the next day would have severe thunderstorms all day in the entire Midwest. Since I've heard Kentucky Kingdom had a really bad weather policy and that they closed down the whole park in the slightest of rain, we decided to go to Holiday World instead, because I heard they had a better weather policy than Kentucky Kingdom. But that night, I saw a tweet that Holiday World had closed early that same day I went to Kings Island because of weather, which did come to my surprise. Because of that, it seemed like we would have had to scratch the rest of our trip plans and do nothing the next day, because the weather forecast looked so much worse than the day before for everywhere in the Midwest. After waking up the next day, we saw that the weather drastically changed, and that it was no longer going to have thunderstorms in Santa Claus, Indiana. We then made a last-minute decision to start driving to Holiday World from a hotel in Mason, Ohio. As we were driving to Holiday World, we saw that there was actually going to be a chance of thunderstorms, but on the other hand, in Louisville, there was only a 20% chance of precipitation. So we decided to change our route to Kentucky Kingdom, which was part of our original itinerary. The only problem was that there was no alert about whether the park was open or closed that day, because I didn't know if they had already made a decision to not open the park that day because it was originally showing thunderstorms all day in the forecast. When I called the park, nobody picked up, so we ultimately decided to take the risk and go see if Kentucky Kingdom was open. If it was closed, we would have continued to Holiday World without losing any time, because Indiana's time zone is 1 hour behind Kentucky. When we got to Kentucky Kingdom, the park was open and it was a ghost town. We got to Marathon, Storm Chaser, and Lightning Run, and there were only 2 minor episodes of Scattered Rain, and none of the rides even shut down at all. It worked perfectly for us, and we ended up sticking to our original itinerary after all. Here's one piece of advice for you I have about amusement park trips. Do not listen to the weather. I know that might sound unusual, but it's always a hassle to try to revise and change your itinerary, only to later find out that the forecast was wrong, and then you missed out on your original plan all because you listened to the weather. Of course, there are times when the forecast is correct, but don't make the decision to change your plan too far in advance. Only wait till the few hours beforehand, and then if the location you want to go to is super far, then it may not be worth it in certain cases. In my experience, every time I didn't listen to the weather, I had a good experience. When there is a bad weather day at a park, it's always empty, and if it's a park with a good weather policy, then you'll be able to marathon the coasters while there is a break in rain and thunder. And it's barely the case that thunderstorms last all day non-stop. There are almost always breaks in the weather.